All right. Grace and peace to the body that is the church. I want to thank everybody who listens to this live. We did start a little bit earlier, and so let me. There we go. I forgot I had another screen on. We started a little earlier because we both had some free time a little bit earlier than what we expected. So it will take a few minutes for people to hop in here. And so I'll talk for a few minutes, and then before I do that, actually, Eric, if you want to promote your channel and tell the audience a little bit about your channel, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, thank you. So, hi guys, my name is Eric from Defending Adventism, and it's a pleasure to be here to, study and discuss the Word of God, so that we can enlighten one another, as we see the day approaching. So, thank you, brother, for having me.
Of course, yes, yes, and I do enjoy having the conversation with you because you are of like-minded with me, and your spirit's like mine. We get along pretty well, and it creates a good atmosphere for a nice, hearty conversation of and study of God's word. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually post your. Let's see if that works. I'm gonna post your. Actually, that didn't work. I'm trying to find the link to your. Oh, there we go. I was looking for the link for your channel so I can link it in the description or the
Okay.
comments. But yeah, so today is going to be part 2 of our discussion on Daniel chapter 8. And I always insist whenever I talk to an Adventist I've never talked to before, I believe it is important to talk about Daniel chapter 8 with them because I'm going to read a quick quote real quick from Ellen G. White, where, let me stop the screen, present the screen, where she talks about that this chapter, especially the Daniel 8:14, is the central pillar of Adventism. And I really do find that to be true. It's right here, Great Controversy, page 409. She says, the scripture, which above all others had been both the foundation and the central pillar of the Advent faith, was the declaration, unto 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed, quoting Daniel 8:14. Now, that was not only true of the pre-Seventh-day Adventists, so the 1843 Millerite movement, but also 1844 and beyond Seventh-day Adventist movement. And so I always find it important to talk to Daniel 8 first, and then from there we can go and hopefully Eric and I can have future conversations on other doctrines, or we've even thrown around the idea of maybe doing like a reaction videos to different videos on different topics, whether it's the Sabbath or the law or the atonement or what have you. And we might do these on, it's up to Eric ultimately, but we might do it on his channel. There's different ways we can go about doing this, but I think it'll ultimately hopefully create with the Adventist and the non-Adventist a more what's the right
Uh,
word? Go ahead.
yeah. Do you mind if I make a quick comment on what you just read from Great Controversy?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I believe it said that Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14 is the central pillar basically of the Adventist faith, and yeah, you said you agree, and I also agree. But at the same time, apart from that, I'm actually happy to be in great company because Paul kind of says almost the same thing. In First Corinthians, maybe I don't know. Could you pull it up real quick? First Corinthians chapter 15. If you can bring up the Bible, Eastward.
Yeah, let me stop sharing. Let me present. You said 1 Corinthians 15.
Yes, I find it interesting that Paul says almost the same thing when he's talking about the Christian faith. And why I'm bringing that up is because it kind of feels safe for me to be on the, in great company because he talks about, actually, I think, is it verse 15? Can you go down to verse 15 and see what it says? 15 or 17? And if Christ, I think, yeah, verse 14. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and and faith is in vain. And then verse 17. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, and you are in your sins. So why I'm bringing this up is because I pride myself to be in great company, because the resurrection of Jesus Christ is actually the central pillar of our Christian faith. And so for Adventists also to have a central pillar of their faith, that's kind of, it gives me great joy that there is something that, if we basically can prove that Jesus Christ did not resurrect, then we do not have Christianity. At the same time, if we can what's the word I'm looking for? If we can the word I'm looking for is take off Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14 away from the Bible, then we do not have the Adventist faith. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and so part of the reason why I like to first talk about Daniel 8 with an Adventist is, one, I do believe is the central pillar, but also number two is there are not a lot of conversations between an SDA and a non-SDA on this very chapter and this very topic with the Adventists. And I think for a lot of Adventists, and I know this personally, that they're not really they don't have a lot of interaction with an opposing view on Daniel chapter 8, so it kind of takes them by surprise. And so hopefully this conversation on these topics, or on this chapter, is a blessing to some. And I'm going to push back today on the SDA position kind of hard, but I do it in love, and I think if we all claim to hold the sola scriptura, that is, that the scriptures are the sole infallible rule of faith for the church, which means that whatever doctrine we hold to, whether if it's an SDA doctrine or a Reformed doctrine or a Provisionist doctrine or a Roman Catholic doctrine, that the scriptures need to be the sole infallible rule when it comes to those doctrines. And so if we believe something that as an SDA is not found in the scriptures, we should then correct that. Or if we believe something that is from the Reformed faith that is not in the scriptures, we need to also correct that. And so today I'm going to point out some things that I do believe ultimately the SDAs need to at least look at a little more closely in Daniel chapter 8. And I do believe that what I'm going to present today is a refutation of the SDA position on Daniel 8. Now, you SDAs may not believe that, and that is okay, but I hope you guys at least hear what I have to say, take it to heart. I'm not being rude or mean or aggressive. I'm just giving you what I see as truth. And I'm sure Eric will push back on that and defend his position pretty well. And so,
yeah. I don't know. Your mic is kind of muffled. I'm having trouble hearing. So I don't know. Maybe there's something you can change on that.
I'm gonna adjust the button a little bit. Let me know if it clears up. So I'm gonna keep talking.
It's better now.
That's good. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I unless if you want to go first, I will go ahead and I will present and I'll talk about Daniel 8 and my argument against the SDA position, and then you can respond to that. And if you want to push back on my position, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, so maybe just before you start, you kind of mentioned that Adventists don't really have a lot of conversations with the people of the opposing view, and I will want to agree, but at the same time, the reason as to why I'm actually doing this is, for me, I think I mentioned this in part 1, is that I'm very much convinced of the Adventist faith just by studying this prophecies of Daniel chapter 2, 7, 8, 9, and also 11, and also the book of Revelation. So why I'm doing this is because it's not because I have all the answers to all the pushbacks that you'll give, but I just want to know that is it possible that my position is flawed? Is it possible that I am wrong in my position? And so as you present your position, I'll also have some questions maybe that that I'm going to raise, so that we can just see who is kind of on the right track when it comes to the interpretation of these prophecies. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I do appreciate that a lot. So do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
No, you can go first.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Daniel 8. So just to kind of recap on our previous conversation, if people did not listen to that, and it's fine if you did not. I presented an argument where I call it the transition argument. So if you read Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, and Daniel chapter 8, there is a consistent theme when it comes to the various beast systems, what I call the beast systems. So in Daniel chapter 2, if you recall, there are 4 different types of metals. It goes gold, silver, so on and so forth. Now, we start with gold, and gold is Babylon. And when we see a transition from Babylon, which is what I call a beast system, when it transitions from Babylon to then the next beast system, that is Medo-Persia, it goes to the metal of silver. So you see a very clear transition from one metal to the next metal. That's called the transition argument. So if we have a beast system that is mentioned, whatever's talked about for the first beast in gold is what happens during the time of the first beast, that is Babylon. Now, if we see, for example, a little horn that rises on, say, the second beast system or the metal silver, then we know that the little horn has to do with and is a part of the kingdom of Medo-Persia. In Daniel chapter 7, we see that exact same pattern that happens. We see the lion. And this time it's not metals, it's actual creatures or beasts of the field. So we see the lion, we see the bear, we see the leopard, and we see very ferocious, terrible beasts. And so when it goes from, say, the lion to the bear, it is a very clear transition where the new beast system, that is from the lion to the bear, the new beast system, the bear, is represented as an actual beast or a creature. And if we go from the second beast system or Medo-Persia, that is the bear, to a new one, that is the third beast system, we see a very clear transition to a new creature, that is the leopard. And the leopard represents Greece. Daniel chapter 8 keeps that exact same pattern, although it does not walk through all 4 beasts. And this is on purpose because what the content of Daniel chapter 8 has to do with, it has to do with the little horn of the third beast. Now, how we know that is that the first beast that is mentioned is the ram. We see here in verse 4, the ram. And in the divinely inspired interpretation of this, further on in this chapter, verses 15 through 26, I believe, the ram is said to be Medo-Persia. Now, if we want to see a transition to the third beast, we will see a new creature or a new beast that is mentioned. And in fact, we do see that. We see that there is a male goat that comes up and destroys the ram. So the male goat represents the leopard in chapter 7. That is the kingdom of Greece. So there's a very clear transition from the ram to the third beast, that is the goat. And so if we are to see a transition to the fourth beast, we will see, as the pattern shows from chapter 2 and chapter 7, we will see a new beast, a new creature that is mentioned. But in fact, we do not see that at all. It stops at the goat, that is the third beast, that is Greece. And so whatever is described past verse 5, whatever happens, if there's a little horn that rises, if there's persecution, if there's trampling, all of this happens during the time of the reign of the goat, that is the third beast of the kingdom. That is the argument I presented in the previous conversation we had. Now I'm going to build on that and present a new conversation, or a new argument, that is called what I call the transgressors argument. Now, what's very important to understand is this chapter is about, and this is the reason why Daniel is so perplexed and so sick and
I'm sorry, just one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You already moved to the next. Do you want me to respond to that before you go to the next one, or how do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. Yeah, and then I'll present the next argument. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. So I think now I'm understanding your argument. I don't think I had understood it from the previous video, but either way, I don't think that causes a problem for my position. Okay, so And why I'm saying that is because I think I read this earlier in the first video, that studying the Bible is like assembling a large jigsaw puzzle. If you gather just 2 or 3 pieces together, it is nearly impossible to discern the entire picture. Perhaps in those 2 pictures, perhaps in those 2 or 3 pieces, you can see a horse and you conclude that you are assembling a picture of horses. But a few more pieces reveal a chicken, a cow, and then once you have assembled hundreds of pieces, you can finally see that you have been working on a picture of a landscape which includes a city, a farm, and a range of mountains in the distance. So I'm reading that because I believe that studying the book of Daniel is so much so because it has employed what a lot of people have called the repeat and enlarge principle. And so why I believe that a lot of critics don't really understand the whole book of Daniel the whole book of Daniel is basically because they are studying Daniel chapter 8 out of isolation. And why I'm responding to that is because you've said that you don't see a transition from Greece to Rome, because we are saying that the little horn is basically the papacy. So I'll ask you this. Could you go back to chapter 7, if you don't mind?
Yeah, what verse?
Chapter 7, let's find verse, what is this? I think I asked you this last time. In Daniel chapter 7, you said, of course, we all agree, the lion is Babylon, the bear is Medo-Persia, the leopard is Greece, right?
Yeah.
Did we agree what the 4th beast is?
It's Rome.
Rome. Okay. Rome, is that in phases or just one? Just like, do you see Rome in 2 phases or is it just Rome?
Most likely 2 phases, but I'm not 100% either way. But it is Rome, regardless.
Okay. So why I'm asking that is because if you go to verse, let me see, verse 8. Could you read verse 8, please? Yeah, it says, and I considered the horns, and is this King James? Yeah, thank you. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 horns of the first horns plucked by the roots. And behold, in these horns were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Do you see that this is a transition between from pagan Rome to papal Rome? Because if you say the 4th beast is Rome is in 2 phases. We had pagan Rome from when Rome came into reign until about was it 538 AD, when Rome now had a pope. So we say that the 4th beast is in 2 phases. The first phase is pagan Rome, and then the second phase is papal Rome. Do you see that?
Yeah, that I'm okay with that. But I would not see a transition from the 4th beast to a new beast with the little horn. It is still the 4th beast.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. So then, my response to that will be, if we go back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. Let's read verse 1. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me the first. So just from that first verse, I can, if I go into the mind of Daniel, it's as though he's already told us that in chapter 7, there's already a vision that has appeared to him. So now the second vision, now this vision that is going to have now is kind of going to give more information on what he had seen in chapter 7. So for me, the way that I'll respond to that is because chapter 7, Daniel has told us all the kingdoms that are coming into reign, and he has mentioned a little horn. So when he's mentioning, when he's now going into another vision in chapter 8, and he sees all this, he sees the ram and the goat and then a little horn, that to me should tell me that in his mind, he must be seeing that the same little horn that was in chapter 7 is the same little horn that is seen in chapter 8, but now it is giving more information on what had happened in chapter 7. So what I started by saying is the way that we are supposed to understand the book of Daniel is that it is using a repeat and enlarge principle.
Okay, yeah, I'll address a couple of points that I think are part assumption that is being put into the text. So, first one is you said the little horn here in chapter 8 is the papacy, correct?
Yeah, I'm saying the little horn in chapter 8 is the same little horn in chapter 7.
Okay, so you wouldn't see the little horn in chapter 8 as the pagan Rome. You'd see it as papal Rome.
No, the little horn in chapter 8 is now I will say, okay, I will say this. The little horn in chapter 8 is because in chapter 7 already we see the fourth beast in two phases. You see what I'm saying? So the first phase is
Right.
pagan Rome. The second phase is papal Rome. So why chapter 8 is only using the little horn, the little horn for both phases, is if you look at what the little horn is doing in chapter 8, chapter 8, verse 8, 9, and 10, and 12, those same things, what the little horn is doing spiritually, pagan Rome did physically. An example I'll give you is this. Let's read verse 8. It grew, verse 10, chapter 8, verse 10. It grew great even to the host of heaven. Yeah, King James, okay, thank you. It waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and stars to the ground and stumbled upon them. Yeah, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. So why I'm saying that the little horn in chapter 8 is now the whole kingdom of Rome, but now it is explaining what Rome did both physically, because it waxed great to the prince of the host. We know that it's Rome that crucified Jesus. Okay, and then now when the little horn is coming into the scenes, that same little horn is still magnifying himself even to the prince of the host by taking his place in the sanctuary. So why I'm saying that in chapter 7 we have the fourth beast in two phases. In chapter 8 also we see that same little horn in two phases, both physically and spiritually.
Okay. So, I don't think that actually answers my addresses my argument, but I would like for you to because here in Daniel 8, I don't see how the little horn here can represent both the ferocious beast in chapter 7 and also the little horn that arises on the ferocious beast, right? Because we have to see a ferocious beast here being mentioned. Rather, we see the goat is mentioned, and this little horn arises on the goat. So what you're saying is this little goat has to be the ferocious beast of chapter 7, if your interpretation is the true one.
No, what I'm saying is, if you go, verse 9, it says, and out of one of them came forth a little horn. And I remember when you asked me the last stream we had, from part 1, you were asking where the transition is. For me, verse 8, verse 9, I can see clearly the transition after Daniel has spoken about the goat, which waxed very great. He sees another, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great. And the way that I will connect this little horn to the fourth beast in chapter 7 is that it is using those same words. It's actually, the fourth beast says was dreadful and exceeding great. I think it uses almost the same word. So yeah, I don't. What was the question again? Am I answering your question?
So, well, so maybe it's possible that what you're saying is that one of the four winds is the ferocious beast here in chapter 8, right?
No. Verse 9. Out of one of them came
Right.
forth a little horn.
So out of one of them,
So yes,
them
that
refers
is
to the wind, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes, and that is the transition between the third beast and the fourth beast, or if you will, the third kingdom and the fourth kingdom,
Right. So
which in this case is Greece and then Rome.
okay, yeah, yeah. So if that is true, and if I'm following, that means that one of these four winds is the ferocious beast of chapter 7, correct?
No, the way I will interpret one out of the four winds is the four directions of heaven, which is the north, south, east, west. That's how I will interpret that.
Okay,
Out
so
of the four
there is.
winds of heaven.
So then you would acknowledge that there is no fourth beast that is mentioned here in chapter 8, then, right?
Chapter 8,
Yeah.
the fourth beast or the third beast. Remember, chapter 8 does not mention Babylon. So chapter 8 is only talking about, in my opinion, is talking about three kingdoms, which is Middle Persia, which is the ram, goat, and the little horn. So,
Right.
which is three kingdoms, not four.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just trying to establish where the fourth beast is mentioned in chapter 8, because in chapter 7 it's very clearly mentioned there's the ferocious beast, and then on top of the ferocious beast's head a little horn arises, whereas here in chapter 8 this little horn arises on top of the goat, and the goat is not the ferocious beast of chapter 7, and you agree with that, and yet the little horn here in chapter 8 arises on the goat. And
Okay.
so you have to say either there is no ferocious beast, or there's no fourth beast that is mentioned in chapter 8, or possibly one of the four winds you could say is the ferocious beast.
Okay, I think one mistake you're making is here you are reading something into the text which is not in the text. You're saying that the little horn is on the goat. It doesn't say that. The text does not say that. The text says out of one of them came forth a little horn. The little horn is not on the goat.
Okay, so yeah, okay, gotcha. So I'll explain that here. So in the divinely inspired interpretation of the symbols that were mentioned in verses 1 through 14, it says, the angel says, "Behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation," for it refers to the appointed time of the end. "As for the ram that you saw with two horns, there are three kings, these are the kings of Media Persia. And the goat is the king of Persia, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which four others arose." So these four others arose on the goat still, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. "Four kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. At the latter end of their kingdom," so their kingdom still refers to these four kingdoms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it's still in the time of the goat, of the third beast of Greece. "At this time, at the latter end, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of boldface, one who understands riddles, shall arise." Now, is that the little horn?
Yes.
Okay. So we just established that during the time of the goat, even though it's at the latter end of the goat's life, it was still during the time of the goat, the little horn arose. That's why I say what I say.
Okay. So I don't see how that disproves my position, because actually, and I think it says, "and at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king." So it says so the way I'm understanding this verse 23 is that this little horn, or the king of boldface, is rising after Greece, or after the goat. That's what I'm understanding. At the latter end of their kingdom.
Okay, well, this might put you on the spot, and if you can't answer it, not a big deal.
Okay.
Maybe you can look into it and maybe make a post and tag me or something like that, or send me a text. I would need to see where latter end means after. So if you know of somewhere where where the word's used, then you can bring it up.
Let's say okay. What I meant to say is that at the latter end of their kingdom. So the way I'm understanding that is towards, or at the end of the kingdom, at the end of the Greece kingdom. Oh, and by the way, yeah. Just as I continue, it says here. Do you mind going? Okay, because I think somewhere in Deuteronomy it helps us understand who this king of boldface is. I've reached the end. A king of bold face, one who understands riddles. Could you go to King James? Let's see what King James says.
Yeah.
Verse 23 says, and in the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall arise, shall stand up. So if you go to Deuteronomy, let's go to Deuteronomy and see what Deuteronomy says, because I think there's a place in Deuteronomy where it was prophesied that king of fierce countenance is actually Rome. Deuteronomy. Let me get the exact verse. Sorry. 28. Is it 28? Yeah, let's go to Deuteronomy 28. I'm trying to get the verse. Yes, Deuteronomy 28. Let's read from verse 47. Okay, so it says, because thou sawest, is that the one? Yeah. Because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness and of heart for the abundance of all things. What it says, therefore shalt thou serve thy enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. So I think for me, this Moses is giving a prophecy or a description of the destruction of Jerusalem. If you read chapter 28, the whole of Deuteronomy 28 is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. It says here, verse 49, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Then verse 450 says, a nation of fierce countenance. Did you see that?
Yeah.
A nation of fierce countenance. So from what it says, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. If you go to the visions of Daniel chapter 7, I think it's Rome which is described as iron. So when he says he shall put a yoke of iron, upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee, that is describing the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome in AD 70. What do you think about that?
I've heard that before. I haven't actually thought about it too much, to be honest with you. I think it's a stretch to say. Let me go back to Daniel real quick. 8. Now, let's see, verse 8. Now,
Yes.
there's going to be more stuff that I'm going to bring up in my next argument that will show you why it's I think impossible for it to be speaking of Rome in any way, shape, or form. But it's still at the latter end of their kingdom, and their kingdom still refers to the goat. So that means that at the latter end of the life of the goat, this king of boldface arises. And so if we think about at the time period of the latter end of the goat's life, it can be roughly around 150 BC to about 50 BC. That's rough. That's towards the latter end of its life. So that means around this time, this little horn is going to arise and is going to destroy mighty men and people who are saints, and fearful destruction shall come. Now, we know that didn't really happen from Rome to the Jews at that time. That happened in 70 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Time is off if we're going to say that's Rome. But what I was trying to point out to you when bringing this up is that you said the little horn in 8 verse 9 was 2 phases, pagan and papal Rome.
Yes.
But it can't be papal Rome because papal Rome is still not for another 500, 600 years from when this happens, from when this starts to happen. And so it has to be, at the very least, if you're going to take your position, it has to be at least pagan Rome. It can't be both pagan and papal. I think that is reading too much into the text, a position that is just not there. So I mean, I obviously don't agree with it, but from your position, it would be makes more sense to say that it is pagan Rome and not papal Rome. And I think the commentary, your church's commentary says that. I think I have to pull it out.
Okay, so in that case, then, if your argument here is that the little horn is Antiochus Epiphanes, right? That's your argument.
Well, yeah, Antiochus. Yep.
Okay, I just want you to walk me through and show me exactly how he fulfilled everything from verse. Let's go to Daniel chapter 8 and from verse 9. Will you walk me down and show me exactly how he fulfilled? From verse 9. Just walk me through it until verse 14.
Yep. So out of one of them came a little horn. So a little horn, I believe, is Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth, and he grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and toward the glorious land. So when Antiochus first arose as the little horn, before he arose, he was a captive. He was a political captive in Rome. Rome had taken him captive because his father was actually pretty good at what he did. He conquered a lot of land, won a lot of battles, but he ended up getting captured by Rome. Let me see, but through, and I forget some of the details. I'll have to read all these details again. It's been a while, but through deceit. Now, Antiochus was actually very charismatic. He was able to talk his way out of a lot of situations. A lot of the Roman elites liked him, and so he was able to talk his way out of captivity. And for them to kill, I believe he had Rome kill his brother, who took the throne from when Antiochus' father passed away, and then he was able to succeed his brother and became the ruler of the Seleucid Empire. So it's through that like deceitfulness and that cunning that he was able to accomplish that. And through his time as the ruler of the Seleucid Empire, he did not completely, but he did bring his kingdom out to the south, that is Egypt. And I do believe chapter 11 has a lot of details about his, not only his, but other previous kings' battles with the south, that is Egypt. And then also toward the east, he conquered land as well too. He grew his empire. His empire actually flourished during his time. He was able to make more mints, so his coins were being produced, and he was actually doing pretty well and actually the historians will say that he was the last great Seleucid ruler. After him, all the other rulers of the Seleucid Empire just kind of sucked and caused the empire to fall. And toward the glorious land, which this is what the vision itself is about, where he grew exceedingly great towards the glorious land. That is what verses 10 through 12 is all about. And in the previous conversation we had, I mentioned this, but I'll mention it again, is that the historians do they puzzle as to why Antiochus was so evil and wicked and harsh towards the Jews, and none of the other Seleucid rulers were. He was the only one to be so wicked and evil towards them, slaughtering them, taking away their religious beliefs, forcing them into pagan beliefs, and all this kind of nonsense that he did. And so he definitely did fulfill all of what 10 through 12, when it talks about he grew great even to the host of heaven. He took away the law, took away the Sabbaths, the feast days, and actually, ironically, he is actually a great antitype for the SDA end time Antichrist, because he takes away the Sabbath. He forces them to not observe Sabbath and to observe the pagan holy days.
Okay. So,
go ahead.
Verse 10. Verse 10 says, "It grew great even to the host of heaven." What's the interpretation of the host of heaven?
I think what it's saying here is that so in the book of Daniel, I'm sure you agree with me that there is the physical and there's the spiritual. So when it talks about him warring and trampling down the host of heaven or the stars, they're talking about God's people. but then there is also a spiritual battle that is happening behind that. Chapter 10 talks about this a little bit, where there are angelic hosts that represent the kingdoms. So there's the kingdom of Medo-Persia, kingdom of Greece, kingdom of Babylon, that are evil entities that fight against guys or angels like Michael the Archangel and others. And so I think that's a kind of a play on that. But when it says, when he took some of the hosts and some of the stars and threw it down to the ground, I think it's referring to both that physical and that spiritual battle that is happening at the same time.
Okay, so you are willing to say that the little horn in chapter 8 is Antiochus Epiphanes, and what I'm saying is that the little horn is the papacy, or if you will, Rome, in both faces. I don't know if... Okay. Let me ask this straight question right now.
Yeah.
Do you think that... Okay, you know what the papacy has been doing, right? In terms of claiming to have the power to forgive sin, in terms of even the title itself, the Vicar of Christ, which means basically he's like Christ on earth, something like that, right? Do you think that it is mentioned anywhere in the book of Daniel or Revelation?
What, Rome?
No, the papacy. Yeah, Rome or the papacy.
I'm not 100% if the papacy is the end time Antichrist. It may be. At the very least, I think that they will play a part in the end times, in a negative sense, in a bad sense. To what extent, I'm not 100% right now, but it's possible. Yeah, I'm not against it.
Okay, so could you go back to chapter 7 for a little bit?
Sure.
So I can just show you something. Because, like I said, I am so convinced of this position. And the position is that the little horn, especially in chapter 7, is actually the papacy. So let's go down to verse 25 and see. 25. It says, and he shall speak great words and against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Saints of the Most High. And think to change times and laws, and they shall be given unto him, unto his hand for a times and dividing over time. What do you understand this to be? How do you interpret this? The little horn. This is basically, it's talking about the little horn in Daniel chapter 7.
I don't have an interpretation right now, so
Okay.
I mean, I can even grant your position 100% on this, and that's fine with me.
Okay, so why I'm bringing chapter 7 here is because the papacy is fulfilling every single part of Daniel chapter 7, of the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. He says they speak great things against the Most High. And why I asked you if the papacy is mentioned anywhere in the book of Daniel or Revelation, that's what I was really hoping you will point me to Daniel chapter 7, because this is clear as day. He shall speak great words against the Most High. If you got also Revelation chapter, I think it's chapter, is it chapter 13, where it talks about the beast also, that has almost all the components of these four beasts in Daniel chapter 7. It says that on his head it had like a name speaking blasphemies, and the way that the Bible interprets blasphemies is the things that I've mentioned earlier, claiming to have the power to forgive sin, and a man making himself to be equal to God. So without a doubt, Daniel chapter 7, the little horn of Daniel chapter 7 is most definitely the papacy. So the way that we have connected this is because now if you go back to now to chapter 8 now, it is giving more information, because like I mentioned earlier, the books of Daniel chapter 7, the whole prophecies are one prophecy giving more information on the other prophecies, and that's why I can even clearly say chapter verse, like let's say like verse 11, he says, yeah, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. And I don't know what your interpretation of the prince of the host is, but the prince of the host to me is Jesus Christ. So the way that the papacy magnified himself even to the prince of the host, number one, like I said, because the little horn here is in two phases. Rome magnified himself even to the prince of the host. It's Rome that crucified Jesus. And also, in the spiritual, so in a physical sense, or in a literal sense, Rome magnified himself even to the prince of the host, which is Jesus, by crucifying Jesus. In a spiritual sense, the papacy is now claiming to have the power to even forgive sin, or to be in the place of, or taking the place of Jesus. So verse 11, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the way that I understand that is that it is only the papacy that can fulfill this, and not Antiochus Epiphanes.
Yeah, I see a number of issues with what you said, but something real quick I want to point out is if, in fact, verse 11 is the crucifixion of Christ, you're still in the pagan Roman time period. And so what happens in verses 10, 11, and 12 is during the time of pagan Rome and not papal Rome. So this still cannot be referring to papal Rome in any way, shape, or form. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I see what you're saying, but for me, if you look at the kingdoms of chapter 8 is talking about the first beast we are seeing here is the ram. The second beast is the goat. And the way that I'm understanding this is that chapter 8 is a repeat and enlarge on all the prophecies that have come before it. Okay, so if we are seeing a little horn in chapter 7, and then we see a little horn in chapter 8, my understanding is that we are supposed to interpret that as the same little horn, unless we are told that that little horn is different, because that Daniel chapter 7 is giving kingdoms which will rule the world from Babylon until the second coming. The same thing is happening in chapter 8. These kingdoms are ruling until the second coming of chapter 8. And I think, like I pointed earlier from part 1, was the way that the fourth beast is destroyed in chapter 7 and chapter 2 and chapter 8. The fourth beast, which is Rome, is destroyed the same way. Chapter 2 says the fourth beast was destroyed, was broken or destroyed without hand. Chapter 8 also, the fourth, the little horn, we are told, is also destroyed without hand. So the way that I will understand chapter 8 is that chapter 8 is also giving an overview from the ram, which is Medo-Persia, until the second coming of Jesus, because it says the little horn was destroyed without hand. So that's really how I will connect those prophecies, and not just study chapter 8 in isolation.
Yeah. So real quick, chapter 2, I thought the feet or the statue was destroyed by the rock hitting the statue, whereas the rock was formed without human hands. So there's not really that connection, other than similar language being used, right?
Let's go there.
I remember
See what it says. Let's go to chapter 2.
Yeah.
Read from verse. What is this verse? Yeah, verse. Let's go to verse around 40, 44. Is that 44? Okay. If you can find the phrase I'm looking for is the stone cut without hand destroys the image. Verse 45. For as much as thou sawest, 45. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. You see that expression there used, without hands? And it break in pieces the iron, the brass, and the silver, and everything. So this, I think I asked you last time what this is pointing to. I don't know if you agreed that this is pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ, where it is him who destroys all these other kingdoms that have ruled. Okay, and so chapter 8 also uses the same verbiage, without hands, because it talks about the little horn now destroyed without hands. So for me, that's how I will try and connect these chapters, because I don't really believe these exact verbages are used just to kind of confuse us, or they have like a different meaning or something like that. So for me, that's how I will answer that. Chapter 2, we see exact verbiage. The fourth beast is destroyed without hand. Chapter 8, the little horn is destroyed without hand, and that to me is describing the second coming.
Okay, so a question for you then. If we can use that kind of interpretation or hermeneutic, I should say, if we see the phrase without hands, and if we see that phrase used somewhere else, then it needs to be referring to the same thing. If
No,
we
I'm
need
talking.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the way I answer that is like I said earlier, Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, and chapter 8 are talking about the same vision. So God is showing Daniel the same vision, but using different illustrations. So if he's talking about the same vision and is using the same verbiage, then yes. But okay, because this we're talking about context. But if you go to the book, like let's say Ezekiel, and you see a word used without hand, you can't just assume that. You can't take the meaning of Daniel and then bring it here. What I'm saying is the context of the whole book of Daniel chapter 8 is Daniel being shown visions, the same vision, but using different illustrations. And all these illustrations are adding, basically is giving repeat and enlarge. So chapter 2 is using the image. Chapter 7 is using beasts. Chapter 8 is also using the same beasts. And so if we see that in the whole of these visions, which is giving a transition of kingdoms, and the exact verbiage is used, and all of them are actually given from the time they are ruling until the second coming. That's how I'm connecting them. I'm not just picking an expression out of context. I'm talking about chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8 are talking about describing events, our kingdoms that are ruling from the time of Babylon until the second coming. That's why I'm taking those exact verbiages out.
Yeah, I follow that. Yeah, I wasn't meaning to imply that you're just randomly taking words and applying them. But so in the context of Daniel, then you would agree that if Daniel chapter 2, 7, and 8 show a certain pattern, that pattern needs to follow, right?
Yes.
Because they're the same visions. Okay, so
yes, and also, sorry, I'm sorry to cut. No, I don't mean to cut you like that. And also, and I know this has also brought another contention. But if you also go to Daniel chapter 11, I don't think we have time to go to Daniel chapter 11. And another expression that has been used in Daniel chapter 11 is this term "stand up." So every time you see in the book of Daniel, the word "stand up" being used is basically a transition between the last kingdom and the next kingdom, and that basically says stand up is a new king is beginning to reign. So the way that I interpret that is, if you see an exact or an expression used in the whole book of Daniel, the way that I use that is we are supposed to understand that as the same thing.
okay, so then you'd agree that if there's a pattern that is set between the visions of 2, 7, and 8, then that should follow in all the visions, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then that pattern I showed you earlier with the the transition argument, you would agree with that?
I will agree with that. But again, my counter argument will be the little horn that is appearing in Daniel chapter 8 is not the first time it's appearing. It has appeared in Daniel chapter 7. And so from chapter 8, from verse 1 we read, the Bible says, this vision appeared to Daniel after the first one that had already appeared. So in the mind of Daniel, even as this second vision is appearing, or the third vision, I don't know, already he has in mind that there is something that God has been trying to communicate to me all along using different images. So if he's using different illustrations, but then in chapter 8, he's using the same exact verbiage of the little horn, the way that I'm supposed to understand that is that this little horn is the same little horn in chapter 7, unless otherwise I am told. I think for me that will be a very safe assumption to make. unless otherwise told, assume that this is talking about the same vision.
Okay, I won't push the point any further. I just want to see if you'd agree. So I'm gonna go on to my next argument. I'm gonna present
Yes.
that for you. And that is the transgressors argument. So here in verse 9, right, the little horn arises. In verse 10, it grows great, even to the host of heaven, and some of the hosts and some of the stars it threw down on the ground and trampled on them. Now that's important because that's the activity that the little horn is doing towards the hosts and the stars. It's trampling them to the ground, or trampling on them, excuse me. And it became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. So this is everything the little horn does. He tramples the host, he takes away the regular burnt offering, and he overthrows the sanctuary. Now, verse 12 says, and a host will be given over to it together with the regular burnt offering. Now, notice here, it's kind of repeating what it said in verse 10, 11, but notice here, it is given this and it does all this. It is because of transgression. So it does all of this evil stuff, all this bad activity, and it's because of transgression. So we have to figure out who these transgressors are that causes this little horn to arise and to trample the host and to overthrow the sanctuary and take away the regular burnt offering. It goes on to say it will throw truth to the ground and it will act and prosper. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, for how long is the kazon? So this word is kazon, is vision, but the Greek or the Hebrew word is kazon. So for how long is the kazon concerning, or that concerns the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and the host be trampled underfoot. So the question is how long is this kazon, or this vision that concerns all of this that is described in verses 10 through 12? So in the interpretation that is given by the angel in verse 15 onwards tells us, or not, it just tells us more details and describes these images and all this activity of this little horn. And so what it has to say is, we'll start in verse 17. So he came near where I stood, and this angel came near where Daniel stood. And when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he, that is the angel, said to me, that is Daniel, understand, O son of man, that the kazon, the same word used here in verse 13, this kazon that concerns the regular burnt offering, transgression, and the giving over the sanctuary and the host, the kazon is for the time of the end. So there's another hint here. This kazon, which specifically has to do about the transgressors and the rising of the little horn, is for the time of the end. Verse 18, when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand up. He said, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. I'm going to explain that here in a second. For it refers to, in other words, this indignation refers to the appointed time of the end. So this indignation here refers to what verse 17 says, the kazon. So indignation is God's wrath that is poured out on transgressors. That is why in verse 12 it says the little horn is active because of transgression. Okay. And so we're going to get another hint here. And this is why it still has to be in the Greek kingdom, because the timing of all of this, it fits perfectly. And we already talked about the timing of these, the goats, the first horn, the four horns that comes up. And at the latter end of their kingdom, and you agree with me on this latter end is still the great kingdom when the transgressors have reached their limit. So these transgressors are transgressing during the time of the third beast, that is Greece. They reach their limit. That means their transgressions have been filled up or been completed. God's indignation is poured out, and it is expressed as the little horn arising. Because when the little horn arises, he does what? He does this. He shall cause fearful destruction. He shall succeed in what he does. He shall destroy mighty men and people who are saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. So, what we see here is that whenever the little horn arises, and so your position is that it is pagan Rome, or possibly papal Rome, although that doesn't really seem to fit as much with the timing and the stuff that's described here. But we'll give you it is both pagan and papal Rome. That means during the pagan time, this indignation is being poured out on the transgressors. And what that means is that this kazon right here in verse 13, which the same word here in verse 17, excuse me. This kazon is for the time of the end, and this time of the end is the indignation on the transgressors. That means that the 2300 here is specifically about the indignation of God's wrath expressed through the little horn on the transgressors. So I hold that the transgressors are the Jews, and that the indignation of God's wrath was expressed through Antiochus Epiphanes IV onto the Jews, and this matches up with perfect with history, and also with the timing of it being on the third beast, that is the goat or Greece.
Okay. So I don't know if I should ask this right now, but do you see a connection between Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 9?
No, because Daniel 9 is about what happens during the fourth beast. So whenever whenever events happen in a vision, it needs to be connected through the time of whatever beast is reigning at that time. So what I see here in Daniel chapter 8 is the activity of the little horn happens during the time of the third beast, and that would be in chapter 7. That would be the leopard, and then in chapter 11 it is talked about as well too, or in chapter 2 it is is it iron? I'm forgetting on the top of my head, but it's the metal after silver. That is the time of when what happens here in verses 9 through 14. That is what the 2300 refers to as the time of the Greek Empire.
Do you think that when Daniel is being told this vision, especially the 2300-day vision, do you think he understands it? Does he understand it?
To a certain point, I think he knew who, because when the angel said the ram is Medo-Persia, he definitely understood that, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
When he said the goat is Greece, he understood that. Yes. When it says the great horn is the first king, he may not know who the first king is, but he understands it's the first king. Mm-hmm. As for the four horns that were broken, in place of which arose four kingdoms shall arise from his nation. He understands that. That's pretty straightforward. So he understands most of the vision. I think what was happening with Daniel at the end is he's so distraught and perplexed. Why? Because when this vision is given, where are they? They're in captivity.
In Babylon, yes.
Yes, exactly. And he's getting another vision that's saying that the same thing's going to happen to his people again in the future.
Okay, so let's read 27 together.
Yeah.
And I, Daniel, was overcame and lay.
Let me get you your version real quick. There we go.
Yeah. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days, and afterward I arose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Already you've pointed out clearly that in verse 23 and 24, the angel is actually explaining the vision, has tried to explain the vision, and explaining the vision by, I mean, he has told him what the ram is and what the goat is and the 4 horns on the goat are, right? Why do you think that Daniel still says he does not understand the vision? Because he says here, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So my argument is Daniel does not understand the 2300-day vision, because already the angel has explained the other vision, which is the ram and the he-goat. The only part that that Daniel does not understand, because he says here clearly, but I was appalled by the vision and none understood it, is talking about the 2300-day prophecy. So now when we go into chapter 9, now that's when we have the angel coming to explain what the vision that he had not understood in chapter 8 was. That's why I asked you, do you see a connection between chapter 8 and chapter 9?
Right. I don't believe that Daniel is saying that he didn't understand it himself because he was given the interpretation. He just when he told other people about it or talked to people about it, they could not understand it. Let me look something up real quick. Trying to find. Let me see. Okay, here. So in Daniel 1, verse 17, as for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. What do you think that means?
I think that means, in as much as God allowed it, Daniel had understanding of visions, the visions that he was seeing.
Yeah.
But that, yes, but also, that will contradict. If Daniel had understanding in all dreams, especially chapter 8, then he should have been the one to tell us, this vision that God gave me, I understood. But the one in chapter 8, it clearly says I didn't understand, and none understood the one in chapter 8, verse 14.
Well, could it also possibly be that he is saying that no one else besides him understood it?
With which vision? All visions or just the chapter 8 and verse 14?
Well, this says all visions and dreams. God gave him understanding of all visions and dreams. So I would assume
Okay.
it refers to all the visions in the book of Daniel, in dreams.
The way that I will understand that God actually says God gave them understanding and skill in all literature. Okay, so you remember when the king had the vision, right? And he called all those people to kind of explain what the vision was, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm forgetting how this went, but did the king tell Daniel what he had dreamt, or it's Daniel who came to explain to the king what he had dreamt?
Well, if I remember correctly, God gave him the understanding.
Yeah, so God gave him the understanding through a vision. So
Yeah.
When the king is calling Daniel into his presence to tell him, I had a dream, but I forgot it, Daniel did not immediately be like, okay, no, oh, you didn't understand it? I think I understand what it means. No, Daniel had to go and pray and ask God to show him the vision so that he can be able to interpret it. Even after God had shown him the vision, God still had to give him that interpretation. So I agree that Daniel had understanding in all visions, but it's only God who was giving it to him. If God had not given him the interpretation, he will not understand anything. And I believe in chapter 8, this specific vision of chapter 8, he didn't understand that, because when the angel comes in chapter 9 and verse 17, the angel clearly says, now I am sent to give the understanding of the vision that was shown in chapter 8, but he didn't understand. Is it chapter 8 or was
You said chapter 9?
Chapter 9, yeah. I'm sorry, verse 33.
Yeah.
At the beginning of your pleas for mercy, a word went out, and I have come to tell you for thou art greatly loved. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. So what is about to tell him right now is the vision, which chapter 8 ends by telling us, none understood this vision. And he's still praying because he wants to understand that vision. Then God sends the angel to come and explain it in chapter 9. That's why he says, now I am sent to explain to you the vision. Then he says, now understand the vision. Then he starts by saying, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. So the way I understand that is chapter 8 and chapter 9 are connected, because when the angel comes in chapter 9, he is actually explaining the vision that Daniel had not understood in chapter 8, which is the 300-day prophecy. That's how we connect chapter 8 and 9.
Okay, sorry, I had somebody at the door. So, here's a couple issues, and I'll make my points. But real quick, chapter 10. Notice this in verse 1. It backs up what verse 1 or chapter 1 verse 17 was saying, that Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. It says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. So he's definitely having understanding of the vision. I think the issue is with other people who do not have that understanding because they weren't given it by God. If we go in chapter 9, what is chapter 9 about? It's not about a little horn arising and trampling and destruction and all of that. Chapter 9 is about, because that's already happened to them. Chapter 9 is about restoration. And so Daniel's prayer in verse 1 and 19 Daniel is pleading to God, saying he knows the time is soon. He doesn't know when exactly. Jeremiah talks about it, and other books of the Bible talk about it. He's saying, Lord, we know we did wrong. Our sins, our wickedness, our evil, we've been made desolate because of that. Forgive us of our iniquities. Restore us, restore the land, restore the temple, the sanctuary, make your name known amongst the people. But his plea is for restoration. And so Gabriel is sent because of that. It says, hold on one second. Okay. Yeah, just go ahead and yeah, that's fine. Yep. We'll start in verse 18. It says, oh my God, incline your ear and hear, open your eyes and see our desolations in the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy. So very clearly, the plea is, restore us, God, back to our rightful place, although it is not based upon our righteousness, but on your mercy. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, pay attention and act. Delay not for your own sake. Oh my God, because your city and your people are called by your name. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my plea before the Lord, my God, for the holy hill of my God, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first. So in other words, in the previous vision, it's the same Gabriel, is what he's saying. He came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. He made me understand, speaking with me and saying, "Oh, Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding on what? On what was said previously, is that we are desolate and we need to be restored." He's going to give him understanding about that, when that's going to happen, what that looks like, what the future looks like in that particular aspect. He made me understand, speaking with me and saying, "Oh, Daniel," I read that, excuse me. Verse 23, at the beginning of your pleas for mercy, a word went out. So in other words, at the beginning of your pleas, so verse 1 through 19, at the beginning of your pleas for mercy, a word went out, and I have come to tell it to you, for you are greatly loved, which is, that would be incredible to hear alone right there, but from the angel Gabriel, that you're greatly loved. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision.
What vision will that be in your
And that
understanding?
refers to verses 24 to 27, which is the understanding that is given to Daniel.
No. Can you go back to 23?
Yeah.
When it says, therefore consider the word and understand the vision. What vision will that be?
It is what is 24 to 27.
Oh, that's the understanding of that.
So yeah, that's the mare. The word for vision is mare, and that's important. You guys do point out kazon and mare a lot. This is the mare of, or the understanding of. So the mare of the restoration that God is going to give to His people, not just right when the 70 years ends that Jeremiah speaks of, but also of future restoration when the Messiah is to come. That's
Yeah,
the
I
understanding
know.
He's giving to
I,
them.
I know. What I'm asking, he says, when he says, therefore consider the word and understand the vision.
Yeah.
What is that vision that he's talking about that Daniel needs to understand? Is that
It's
something that he has not mentioned or something that has been previously mentioned?
No, that's the mare. The vision for the word that is called mare, that it means it is understanding that is being given to him by a visionary being, by an angel, and that is Gabriel.
So you don't see that if chapter 8 is ending by Daniel saying, but none understood the vision, but then he says, therefore consider the word and the vision. You don't see the connection that now this angel is coming to explain to him the vision that he had not understood in chapter 8.
No, because I don't, and here's why: because there is no connection with what is talked about. Daniel 9 is about restoration and the coming Messiah. Daniel 8 is about what transgressors being punished.
Okay, so when he says 70 weeks are determined, he says here decreed.
Yeah.
What's the original word? Because I mean, the languages I'm using right now, I'm pretty sure you've heard them because this is really what is establishing the Adventist faith. When it says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, how do you understand that?
70 weeks are
Because our understanding is that those 70 weeks must be cut off from the larger portion, which is the 300-day prophecy.
right. 70 weeks are decreed, or 77s are decreed about your people. In other words, there's a period of time called 77s or 70 weeks that are decreed about your people and your holy city, and is to do these 6 stipulations, which is to finish transgression, put an end to sin, atone for iniquity, everlasting righteousness, seal both kazon. Notice that, seal both kazon and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. So there's 77s that are to take place, and then when the last 7 happens, all of these 6 stipulations are completed.
Okay, so you're saying the 70 weeks has nothing to do with the 300-day prophecy? I
The
mean, the
23.
300 days, which is in chapter 8?
No, they're not directly connected. No, but the 77 span from 457 BC up until the 1st century. So during that time, during the time of the third beast, the 2300 happens. So in that sense, they're happening at the same time, but they're not directly connected as a starting point.
So I guess the way that I'll ask this question to just kind of simplify it, because I mean, for me, I kind of see the evidence right here. I would ask it this way. Do you think the SDA position is something that has been stretched, or do you see a possibility that chapter 8 and chapter 9 could be connected in that when you say 70 weeks are determined, and that word determined is cut off, 70 weeks are cut off, which is 70 weeks of, 70 weeks, which is really a smaller portion, is cut off from the larger portion. And so the way that we've come up with that interpretation is when it says, "No, therefore understand that from the going forth of the commandment to build and restore Jerusalem," that is giving the starting point for both prophecies. Do you think that is us stretching it, or there's a possibility that that interpretation could be correct?
Um, um,
Is there a possibility that that interpretation could be correct, or we're just making stuff up?
well, I mean, we can. So when I want to be kind of generous. Definitely I guess you could say a quote unquote possibility, although I would say very slight possibility because thank you, because the two visions are about two very different things. You can't have a starting point for desolations and a starting point, an exact same starting point for restoration. both of those can't happen at the same time with the same people in the same group in the same city in the same temple. But the way the SDAs do use certain points of it being Gabriel, and Gabriel saying, "I'm here to make you understand the vision," and then they point to the word kathak, which is, it does need to be pointed out that the word kathak, which is decreed or cut off, is what's called a hapax legomenon, which means it's a single-use word in the Old Testament. And so it's whenever there's a single-use word or a hapax legomenon, you always want to be cautious on how you use that word, because there's no other examples you can look at in the Old Testament for how that word is to be used. You can look outside the Old Testament and you may get an idea, but it doesn't mean it has to be that exact idea. And so I think when the word decreed, I think that's a perfectly good time, because in fact, when God says there are 77s, that means that it is a decreed amount of time that is to happen or to take place, and for these things, these six stipulations to take place. And so decreed, when God sets that time prophecy, decreed is absolutely perfect. But I guess I could say, being generous, that there is a possibility, but again, I would say a slight one.
Okay. So, okay. Actually, I think I was meant to ask this. Could we go back to chapter 8 and verse 14 for a minute? I just need you to understand. Just need you to explain to me what your understanding is. Because it says here, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. What is your understanding of? How do you understand that? What is it that was going to happen at the end of the 2,300-day prophecy, and how do you understand when it was supposed to end? Because this vision has no starting point, no end. I want you to imagine that you are living in the time of Daniel, and you need to understand this vision. How will you understand that there's a time prophecy that has been given? At the end of this time prophecy, the sanctuary will be cleansed, or whatever word you want to say, cleansed, restored to his rightful place and stuff like that. How will you how exactly did it happen if you are saying the little horn is Antiochus Epiphanes? How exactly was the sanctuary cleansed or restored to its rightful place after the activities of Antiochus Epiphanes?
Yeah. So when you're actually living in an active prophecy, right? So the 2300, let's say my position is absolutely correct, you agree with it. So if you're a Jew living in the 2nd century BC, living through that prophecy itself, dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes IV, you're not going to be trying to figure out when the very last day of the 2300 happens. What you're actually going to be looking at is when the little horn, and they would understand it to be Antiochus Epiphanes IV, when the little horn is destroyed without human hands. That's the kind of stuff you look for, the actual events to take place and after the fact of the events. But at the time, if my position is true, then you're even less. You're more focused on the actual war and the battle that is happening, trying to free your people, and doing those very things is fulfilling the prophecy itself. So it's really more of they look at it. You look at it in retrospect, right? Kind of like a historicist type view. You look at it after the fact and you see that it was fulfilled in fact.
Okay, so I have a question on that. So you remember the three wise men from the east, right?
Say that again.
The three wise men from the east during the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do you understand? Do you agree that they had done studies on the coming of the Messiah? Because that time is clearly foretold in Daniel chapter 9. Actually, it says from the going forth of the commandment to build and restore Jerusalem. So it is actually giving a clear starting point and a clear end point, so that the people who are studying it, even though it's a future event, you can actually be able to study that and tell that something is going to happen at this time. You don't have to wait for the prophecy to be fulfilled for you to understand the interpretation of the prophecy. You can actually tell that this prophecy is actually okay, because if you're saying that a prophecy, if you're saying that a prophecy has to be fulfilled for you to understand it, then why is God giving us? Because he has to wait for all these prophecies to be fulfilled for us to understand them. So my argument is these prophecies had to be understood at the time when they are given. Okay, because the three wise men actually in then chapter 7 gave, I mean chapter 7, 8, and 9 gave a clear timeline for the Messiah who was to come, to the point that if these readers of the Bible, even in the time of Daniel, were diligent students, they will have actually calculated the exact time that when the Messiah was going to show up. Because when he shows up, the first thing that Jesus says after he's been baptized, he says, the time has been fulfilled. What time is talking about? The time of Daniel chapter 8. So my argument is that it is very possible to understand a prophecy even before it has been fulfilled.
Yes, no, I don't disagree with you. Now, I was talking specifically about the 2300, but what's and I agree with chapter 9, right? Chapter 9 is about the coming Messiah, and so people are going to study that, and that's about restoration. What Daniel 8 is about the transgressors and desolations. And so, at least in part, what I was saying is that the transgressors, even if they studied it, they would not fully understand because they're to be trampled upon. And if they understood the vision, they would flee from the area and not be trampled upon.
That's right.
But what's actually pretty awesome, in my opinion, is that there were those who were very studious with the prophecies of Daniel, and they actually did, and I do believe, this is my personal opinion, that they were the keepers of the oracles in the Old Testament time at around this time period, because what they did was they understood this prophecy, and they actually fled from the area, and they hid in the Qumran area from the coming persecution, and they actually survived, and they kept with them various documents, and we know them today as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so they were able to survive and keep those documents because they understood the prophecies of Daniel 8 there in the coming persecutor Antiochus IV. So that's pretty, I 100% agree with you. I don't disagree with you. But this prophecy, again, in chapter 8 is about desolations being poured out upon transgressors. And I think you need to at least give us an explanation of, like I pointed out here, remember my second argument, that this time of the end in chapter 8 is specifically about, or this chazon here in chapter 8 is specifically about the time of the end, which is what? It's the indignation of God's wrath on the transgressors. So we have to find out who these transgressors are from your position, why God's wrath is being poured out upon them through the activity of the little horn, and when does that take place? Because that is what this chazon is about.
Yeah. So yeah, I noticed. I realized you asked me a question, but I'm not sure you answered the one that I asked earlier, which was about Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, because it says, "And to 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." So I was asking, what is understanding of this? Because if you're saying that the activities of the little horn here is Antiochus Epiphanes, then that should mean that if interpret 2,300 days says to be 1150, I should expect that at the end of 1150 days, or whatever you want to interpret that to be, something is happening to fulfill that prophecy. So what is that is happening, or how was the sanctuary cleansed or restored to its rightful place after Antiochus Epiphanes?
Yeah. So whether you take it to be 2,300 days or 1150 days, it refers to when the little horn here. So Antiochus, takes away the daily burnt offering, and he tramples or he overthrows the sanctuary. So he does that in a very physical, literal sense. The actual sanctuary that was there in Jerusalem, he overthrows it, and he does very wicked abominations in the sanctuary and around the sanctuary and with God's people. This is why he is This is how he magnifies himself to the Prince of the Host, and this is what causes everything to become desolate: the people, the land, and the sanctuary. And notice here when it says for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored. So, in other words, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, the sanctuary is not in its rightful state. So whatever position we hold to, whether it's years or days cut in half, for that whole period of time, the sanctuary is not in its rightful state. And that makes a lot more sense from my position. whether again it's 2,300 days or 1,150 days, that the physical sanctuary was made desolate by Antiochus. And then after the Maccabean War, this is history that you can read in First Maccabees. After the war is done, they rededicate the temple, put all the furniture back, and put it to its rightful state.
Okay. All right. So, did you ask me a question?
Yes, yeah. So,
Um,
you need me to say it again, or do you remember?
was it about the end of indignation?
Right. Yes.
Okay, so I think you asked me this last time again, and I said I was going to do some more studies on that. I don't think I have done that, but for me, the way he says here at the latter end of indignation, okay, I'm trying to understand how that supports your position. How do you think that supports your position?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll explain it to you. So in verse 17 here, now remember here, I did point out in verse 12, the little horn arises because of transgression.
Okay.
That is why the little horn arises.
Yeah.
All this happens because of transgression. That means there are transgressors that reach their limit. So, verse 13 said, ask the question, how long is the kazon? How long is the kazon that concerns the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? Drop down to verse 17. He says, so he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O son of man, that the kazon, this kazon, which we just read, has to do with the activity of the little horn. This kazon is for the time of the end. So whatever the time of the end is the kazon, and the kazon is the activity of the little horn, specifically the 23.
Okay, just a quick question. Question. You're saying the kazon is the activities of the little horn?
Yes.
You don't think that the kazon is the entire vision which he had actually seen starting from Middle Persia until the little horn? You're just saying is it the entire vision or just the 2300-day prophecy?
Both. So the word kazon is used for the vision itself when Daniel starts to have his visionary experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then here specifically in verse 13, it uses the word to refer to the activity of the little horn. And that's what's important for us, because the kazon here concerns the regular burnt offering. And then here in the divine explanation, it says the kazon is for the time of the end.
And
so
what, yeah, I was going to ask the time of the end. What is the time of the end?
Yeah. So the time of the end here is explained in verse 19. It says, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation. For this indignation right here refers to what? The time of the end. So God's indignation.
Do you think that's the same time of the end spoken of in chapter 12?
Which one? Or chapter 12?
When he says shut up the words until the time of the end. Is that the same time of the end?
No. This one is the same one in 11 verse 30, I think. 11 verse 30.
Okay. I mean, and you're pretty what's the word I'm using? Consistent with that view, because if you had said that it's the same time of the end, then that will actually go against you, because I was gonna say when the book of Daniel chapter 12 is coming to an end, the angel tells Daniel to shut up the vision or the book until the time of the end. So
right.
my understanding will be, at the time of the end, something is supposed to happen where this book, which is closed, is now going to be opened so that the vision can be understood. So that's why I asked you that if the time that you're saying here, the time of the end, is the same time, the time of the end, like in chapter 12.
Gotcha. Yeah. So before I move on, real quick question. Do you believe whenever the phrase time of the end is used, it refers to the same time of the end, or are there different times of the end? Here in the book of Daniel.
In the book of Daniel, it has to be the same time. It has to be the same. Unless, okay, again, like I said earlier, unless otherwise we are told specifically. It is always safe to assume that if a word has been used, if like right now it says until the time of the end. I mean, shut up until the time of the end. If that word has been used over and over again, unless otherwise we are told clearly, it is safe to assume that that is the same time of the end.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. All right. Verse 19, it says, Behold, I shall make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation, for it refers to the appointed time of the end. So we're told that what the time of the end is, it is God's indignation. Now, is it God's indignation on just random things, or is it on transgressors? I would posit that is on transgressors. Why? Because if you remember, we read in verse 11, 12, and 13, there are transgressors and there are desolations that happen because of transgression. So if we drop down to verse 23, during the time of the little horn, which is during the time of the third beast, it says, at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit. In other words, they have completed the level of transgression that is needed for God's indignation to be poured out upon them. A king of boldface arises, who is the little horn. The little horn arises, and just like during the first beast, where Nebuchadnezzar is said to be God's servant, he also acts as a little horn and brings desolations upon God's people. In the same way here, because they're transgressors and they consistently transgress God's law for a period of time and did not repent. In the same way here, this also happens here during the time of the Antichrist, where the transgressors have reached their limit and indignation is poured out upon them through the activity of the little horn. This is the Kazon that lasts for 2300, mentioned in verse 13 and 14.
Okay. And I think the way that the way I understand that is when we went to Deuteronomy chapter 28, that talks about, or that is actually foreshadowing the destruction of Jerusalem. My understanding is that God always protects his people, and actually it's kind of like conditional. He says, if you do this, I will do this to you. If you don't do this, I will also do this to you. Okay, so he gives like a promise, and that promise is conditional. He says, if you obey me, I will take care of you. If you disobey me, this is what will happen. So my understanding is that especially in the destruction of Jerusalem, God, it's really it's what the people or Israel basically uh, reaping what they had sown. Okay, and Daniel actually clearly tells us that it's actually uh, they were in Babylon or in exile because of their sins. Because of their sins. So the way that I understand that is that uh, God always God promises to take care of us all the time. But if we disobey, he can actually step back and even let pagan countries or nations take over and punish the people on his behalf. So my understanding here is that, especially in the case of Israel, right now, the likes of Daniel and the other three Hebrew boys are actually in exile because they had sinned against God, because they had not followed this, especially uh, the rules and regulations which he had given about the land needing to rest and stuff like that. So when they were taken to Babylon to exile, actually the Bible tells us that the land was having its rest and stuff like that. So the way that I understand that is that um, God protects us if we keep his commandments. But if we don't keep his commandments, sometimes he can even raise up a nation to kind of punish his people, in the case of like in the example of Israel and Babylon coming to destroy Jerusalem and stuff like that.
Yeah. So all that's fine. No issues. But the issue that is still for your position and the SDA position, and unless if you want to Well, I'll just continue with this. So the issue is that very clearly the Ka zone. So the little horn, the activity of the little horn, is the Ka zone that lasts for 2300. That's the issue, the central issue that is against the STA position, in my personal opinion. I think I showed that with this argument I just presented, that for 2300s, the sanctuary is overthrown, and at the end of it, it is restored to its rightful state, and all that happens because of transgressors. And so, if we do say that the 2300 is years and starts in 457 BC, that means that when restoration was starting to happen for God's people, when they were released from captivity with Babylon, that at the same time there is also desolations that are happening because of their transgressions.
You mean after the 23rd day, or at what time?
No, so if we say that these are the 2300 are years and they start in 457 BC, which is the STA position, if we say that, and if we go back to what I just explained about the Ka zone being for the time of the end, which is God's indignation on transgressors, which is all this lays out, it's all clear here in verse 17 onward. That means that the 2300, whenever it starts, desolations start for God's people.
Mm-hmm.
The sanctuary is overthrown when it starts. The host is trampled. The daily is taken away when it starts. And so if we say it starts in 457 BC, that means that you have restoration and desolation happening to the same group of people at the exact same time. You see the issue?
Yeah. I think I kind of responded that in part 1 when you asked me what chapter 13 is, what verse 13 is talking about, and the way that I answered that was my understanding of what this Holy One is asking here. He says, and I had another Holy One speaking and said to the Holy One that speaks, for how long is the vision? When he's asking for how long is the vision, my understanding is he's asking the entire vision from the ram, the he-goat, and then the little horn. That's really what he's asking. So that when the answer comes 2300 evenings and mornings, that is now to accommodate the entire vision, not just the activities of the little horn. That is just to accommodate the entire vision because of the word that is used there. How long is the vision? Or how long is the vision? So that vision, the original word that I think you keep saying, is it kazon or
Kazon,
yeah. So that word, when it says how long is the vision, my understanding is talking about the entire vision that Daniel has seen from verse 1, which is the ram, the he-goat, and the little horn.
Yeah. Okay. So the issue that I see with that is, again, it asks the question: how long is the Ka zone concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, giving over the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? None of this is happening during the ram. And to bolster that position, I went down here to the divinely inspired interpretation of verses 1 through 14, and it's not me just saying it. It's the angel that is telling us that the Ka zone is for specifically the time of the end. So even if you do start in 457 BC, that means the time of the end started at that point, because verse 17 says this Ka zone is for the time of the end. And what is the time of the end? It is the indignation of God's wrath on transgressors. That's what this is telling us. So the issue is still coming up and it's still coming back, that although even if you want to start it with the ram, you still have here the interpretation that's given to us by the angel that it is actually referring to not the ram, but rather the little horn and its activity and the transgression.
Okay. My understanding of verse 17 is the time of the end. Actually, my understanding of that, when the angel says, understand, O Son of Man, that the vision is for the time of the end, my understanding is that what the angel is basically saying is that this vision is supposed to be understood at the time of the end. That's why in Revelation chapter 10, we see an angel coming down with the open book to say that now, when he says time no longer, now he says that this time period from 447 BC to 1844 has now come to an end. Now that is when the vision is supposed to be understood. That's really my understanding on that. So he's not saying like it's for the time of the end. What he's saying is that this vision is supposed to be understood at the time of the end. That's why even when Daniel still, when Daniel says the vision, the end of the verse 27 says, none understood it until John now comes to tell us he saw an angel come down, and so that he's now giving the interpretation to John and not Daniel, because Daniel was living in a very time which is far back to the point where he could not understand the activities which were going to happen at the time of the end.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've pushed my points pretty good. Do you want to push back on my position at all?
Okay, so I think what I want to do, because I see time is also, we've been here for like an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I think what I want to do is kind of make like a summary of my case.
Sure.
And then you can make a summary of yours.
Okay.
So really, the condition that we're having right now is basically the whole book of Daniel chapter 8. What I want to make a summary is this. The way I want to make a summary is this. The way we are supposed to understand the book, the whole book of Daniel basically, is understand it as a whole. Because I believe that what you have done and what most of our critics have done is they are trying to understand Daniel chapter 8 in isolation. Really? Okay, if I promise you, if Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, I mean, if Daniel chapter 8 is all we had, I will actually say that there's a possibility that that little horn could be Antiochus Epiphanes, because we're just told the 300-day prophecy, no starting point, no end point. You don't even know when it's beginning. It's as though it's just somewhere in space. You know, the 23rd day is like somewhere in space. But if we have other chapters that are trying to explain to us that, from the going forth of the commandment to build and restore Jerusalem, that's now when you kind of try to have now an understanding of the whole prophecy when you take other chapters into consideration. So the way that I will summarize is this. Then chapter 7 has given us kingdoms which are reigning from Babylon until the second coming of Jesus. Chapter 8 is also giving us the same thing, but chapter 8 has not mentioned Babylon. Chapter 8 has given us, actually, they actually mentioned, it says the ram, Medo-Persia, then the he-goat, Greece, and then the little horn. The way that I understand that chapter 8 is talking about the same vision is the little horn says is destroyed without hand, or is broken without hand. That to me is trying to explain the second coming of Jesus Christ. So like I said, having read chapter 2, chapter 7, and now chapter 8, that already, with that overview, from the starting point, I mean, from all the prophecies that have been given from the kingdoms of Babylon until the second coming, if now someone is giving me another vision of chapter 8, the way that I'm supposed to understand that is take that into consideration, and also take chapters that have come before it, or that are going to come even after it, to kind of explain that. Because I'm saying after, because the whole book of Daniel chapter 8 is not sealed. The only portion of the prophecy that Daniel did not understand was the 23rd-day prophecy. And then at the end of the Bible now, which is Revelation chapter 10, which we interpret as to be the time of the end, starting in the year 1798. Because if we didn't go to chapter 12 of Daniel, actually from verse 72, it will actually tell you that the time of the end is supposed to be after a times and a half, which is the reign of the papacy from 538 AD until 1798. So that means after 1798, we are supposed to see now an explaining of that prophecy, because it says at the time of the end. So if we are saying that the time of the end is after 1798, if the Bible is saying that the time of the end is after a times and a half of a time, and we can clearly put that time as at 1798, then I actually expect that after 1798, something is going to happen to kind of help us understand a prophecy that was sealed. And do we see anything like that in the Bible? Yes. Revelation chapter 10, now we see an angel coming down with a little book open in his hand. And the way that the readers of the book of Daniel the book of Daniel are supposed to understand that is that at the end of the book of Daniel, this book was a portion of that book was sealed. So for any Bible reader, the moment you come to Daniel 10, Revelation chapter 10 and you see an angel come down and a book open in his hand, that actually should point you to 23rd day prophecy, which is the only prophecy that had not been explained. And then whatever is the angel is saying, he says, John took the book and ate it. It was in his mouth sweet, but when it came to in the mouth, bitter. Man, I'm telling you, that is just a beautiful explanation of what happened to the Millerite movement in the year 1844 when they had gone preaching that Christ was coming back, but he didn't come back. Of course, he was moving from the holy place to the most holy place. I'm telling you, man, the way that I'm studying these prophecies, unless someone comes and gives me an alternative interpretation of the whole of the way that we have put these visions together. Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8, and Revelation chapter 10. Because what we are doing here and what my brother has been doing here in Daniel chapter 8 is basically trying to debunk Daniel chapter 8. Even if I was to grant that, he still has to debunk Revelation 10. He still has to debunk Revelation 13, because these visions is actually a continuation of these visions. Because Daniel is saying it was kind of like I will say like a summary. But now we come to Daniel, Revelation chapter 13, we see the same power, the same beast power, still in power. So the way that we are supposed to understand that is that this is just the same vision, but now giving us more information. So my brother is holding the position that Daniel chapter 8, the little horn of Daniel chapter 8 is Antiochus Epiphanes. My position is that the little horn in Daniel chapter 8 is the same little horn of Daniel chapter 7. And actually, that is the only interpretation that lines well with the other portions of the Bible. I think that's a kind of long summary, but my position will be, if you're going to debunk Daniel chapter 8, you also have to debunk Revelation 13, Revelation 10, that talks about the little book that is open. That is open in the hand of the angel.
Yeah, thank you for that, Eric. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in to this live stream, this conversation that Eric and I had. I do appreciate that. So I think what I have shown here is that when it comes to Daniel chapter 8, the SDA position is a position that eisegetes the chapter of Daniel chapter 8. And the main reason why they have to go to Daniel chapter 8 and handle it the way they do is the 2300. And the 2300, if you apply it as years and you start it in a certain date, it will end in 1844. And that is ultimately why at the beginning of this video, I quoted Ellen G. White that said that this Daniel 8:14 is the central pillar of Adventism. That is because it is the only prophecy that you can stretch to 1844. And if it does not stretch to 1844, then that means that 1844 is not a significant prophetic day, but just another day and year in history. Now, there were connections by my friend Eric that were made that I think was forced onto the text that is not there. Because if we read the vision of chapter 8 in its context, it very clearly shows that there is not a transition. And to make a note, I did lay out a pattern that is shown in chapter 2 and chapter 7, and Eric did agree with me that that pattern is there. And so we don't see in chapter 8 a transition from the third beast into the fourth beast. So that means that whatever happens with the little horn is happening during the time of the third beast. That means that it's happening during the time of the Greek Empire. And so it fits very perfectly with the time of Antiochus, who actually indeed did take away the daily burnt offering trampled the hosts under his feet, and overthrew the sanctuary. This was during the time of when the Maccabees rose up and revolted against Antiochus. And ironically enough, Antiochus is a perfect antitype or a type of the end time antichrist for the SDA system, because in fact Antiochus forbids the Jews from keeping any of their Sabbaths, whether the yearly Sabbath or the weekly Sabbath. But the issue is that they have to have it extending until 1844, so they can't apply it in that way. Now, what I did show as well too is that this vision, and what SDA's a lot of SDA interpreters do, is they point to the two words for vision, that is mar'eh and kazon. And they like to make this distinction because they would say that the kazon starts with the ram, and that is in 457 BC, and the mar'eh is the 490 years, I believe. Now, what I showed is that the kazon, actually, in the context of chapter 8, under the interpretation of the angel, the kazon is specifically the activity of the little horn. And I showed that from verses 17, verses 19, and verse 23, and also verses 11 through 13. So that means that the 2300, however long you want to apply it, the little horn is active during that time period of 2300. And so if we extend it for years, that means for 2300 years that the little horn is active and making desolate the God's people and his sanctuary, and taking away the daily for 2300 years. No one in history ever did that. And so I think, prophetically speaking, that it fits better with Antiochus than with the starting period of chapter 9. There is no direct connection to chapter 9 other than Gabriel showing up and giving Daniel understanding of his pleas for restoration. We know in the vision of chapter 9 that it is about restoration and not desolation. Chapter 8 is about desolations on the transgressors, not restoration. I think I'll end with that. I think I have everything. I said everything I have to say for this conversation. Again, I want to thank Eric for this conversation and everybody who tuned in live. Did you have any last words you want to say, Eric? Or
I don't think I do. I was just been there's a few people who have been watching. I don't think we've actually given them much attention. But just to give them a shout out and thank you for joining us.
Did you want to? We could do this if you want. Did you want to address any of the comments that you see?
Okay, it says here who was able to open the seal, scroll on 7 seal. Okay, I think that's a different topic altogether. I was talking about Revelation chapter 10. Okay. Talk about proof texting. But that's exactly, yeah. So I don't think I have any other. No, it's okay. I don't have anything that I want, unless you have something that you want me to talk about.
Yeah, this is a decent point, right? In chapter 11, well, so the vision in 10 through 12 is, right, one vision. You'd agree with that, right?
Chapter 11?
Chapter 10 through 12 is one vision, right?
Chapter 10 through 12?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is the time of the end that is mentioned in chapter 11, and then there's time of the end that's mentioned in chapter 12. Now, you did say that the time of the end in the book of Daniel refers to the same time of the end, but I think even your commentaries would disagree with that, if I recall correctly. I think there's two time of the ends that they have positive.
Okay. Actually, yeah, let me take note of that. I promise to look into that. Daniel chapter 11:35 and 11:45. Okay, yeah, I will look into that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Let's see. Okay, yeah, Mike. Grace be to you, Mike. If any advertisement is correct, then no one understood the vision until 1854. So the Jews couldn't understand it until after the Messiah had already come. Which is actually an excellent point, because, as I pointed out earlier, right, there were Jews that actually understood the coming persecution by Antiochus, and they fled, and they're what we call the Qumran community. And they actually understood that they were able to flee that persecution because they understood the vision of Daniel.
Okay.
Here's another one. These kingdoms are not reigning until Jesus' coming. That is an assumed premise that must be proved instead of assumed. I don't know if you want to address that or.
These kingdoms are not reigning until Jesus coming. That's an assumed premise. Okay, he has to tell me exactly what chapter, because chapter 2 is very clear that the stone that is cut without hands actually hits the image on the feet, and a feet of iron and clay, and that image. I mean that stone becomes a big mountain. So if that's not the second coming, then you have to tell me what it is. And then chapter 7 also talks about it says until the kingdom. What does it say? Chapter 22, I think it says until the saints possessed the kingdom. So that is basically talking about the second coming. So he has to tell me exactly what chapters he's talking about. If it's chapter 8 is clearly saying the little horn is also cut without human hands. So my understanding will be that is the second coming.
Okay. All right. Most of these are directed towards you anyway, so.
There is nothing in Revelation that teaches the book was sealed, Daniel. Well, that I will say that's your opinion. My opinion is Daniel chapter 8, verse 27 says, "Shut up the vision." I mean, this is the vision of the book until the time of the end. And then chapter 12 also verse 4 says the same thing. So my connection is, if this book is closed or shut up, and then in Revelation chapter 10, we see another book open, when that to me is a very clear parallel. Yeah. If only he will allow himself to understand the Antiochus Epiphanes as the fulfillment of the prophecy. Man, I am telling you, I will say that back to you. If only you understood how the papacy has fulfilled all of these specifications that have been given in both chapter 7 and chapter 8. I'm telling you, the papacy is the only one that fits the whole of those descriptions. Magnifying himself to the prince of the host, casting down truth to the ground, doing all those things that the Bible says he will do. It's only the papacy that fulfills all of that.
Well, okay, so here, let me say this. Let's say I agree with you 100% on your interpretation of chapter 7.
Mm-hmm.
You still don't need chapter 8 to refer to that. So why does chapter 8 have to refer to that same thing that you just mentioned, the little horn being the papacy and all that?
I think okay, is really giving more information. Chapter 8, again, like I said, chapter 8 is really needed, because now he gives us the time frame, especially the time frame, because it's only 2300 days is only mentioned in chapter 8. It's not mentioned anywhere else. So like I said, these are the same prophecies, but every prophecy is giving some additional information which the other prophecies don't have. That's really why I will say that chapter 8 is given to give us more information. And the more information in this case that is given is a detailed information on what the little horn does and the time frame, which is the 2300-day prophecy. It's only appearing in chapter 8.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the Antiochus position on chapter 8 can be true, and also your position on chapter 7 can be true at the same time. And so what I'm agreeing with Mike and saying, just come over to the Antiochus position on chapter 8, and you can still hold to the papacy position on chapter 7, and you'll be fine. Peer pressure,
Well,
do it.
no. I'm saying I'll not be fine, because I'll not be fine because I think you heard me say earlier that will be correct if we take chapter 8 out of isolation. Chapter 8 is not out of isolation, because chapter 8 is giving us the 300-day prophecy. Which other chapters of the Bible, or which other books of the Bible, are helping us understand? Again, like you said, if you can prove that Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14 has nothing to do with 1844, we don't have Adventism. We don't have
Agreed.
Adventism.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So chapter 8 and verse 14 has to be correct. And like I said earlier, if you are debunking chapter 8 and verse 14 of Daniel, you also have to debunk chapter 10 of Revelation, chapter 13 of Revelation. And so far, I don't think I have had anyone actually debunk that. And maybe one last question, maybe we can talk about this in the next studies or the next discussions that we have in the future. I would really love to understand what I would really love to know what your understanding of the mark of the beast is, because this is really, again, like I said, this is all these things are connected. You cannot take one topic out of isolation. They are all connected, because the mark of the beast in Revelation chapter 13 is the very same, is actually mentioned. Okay, it's not mentioned, but it is that same beast of the fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7. Yeah, but I guess that's because of time. Maybe we can talk about that at a later date. But
Yeah. We'll probably actually wrap it up now because I
yeah,
have to
sure,
take off here soon.
sure, yeah.
But I wanted to have you answer a few questions. So yeah, man, I do appreciate that. I appreciate the audience being here and talking and listening to us. Definitely pretty awesome, man. So we'll have to set up another time where we can have a conversation. I did mention at the start that I would like to have some sort of like um, we can even like title it like SDA non-SDA react to, and then different videos like debates or whatever. I think it'd be pretty neat. So
Yeah, I think actually, yeah, I think that'd be great. That'd be great.
cool.
Like I said, for me, I've been waiting to do this to get hold of this StreamYard, so I'm available. Yeah, so we can always talk and plan, and whenever I'm available, yeah, I don't have a problem, man.
Yeah, man, awesome. Yeah, no rush, no pressure. It could be like one video a month or whatever. I mean, I
Yeah,
have a busy schedule anyway, so no
yeah.
worries. But
Okay.
all right, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate this.
I appreciate it too. Take care.
Yeah. All
God
right.
bless.
Bye.